First, let's look at the papers.
Yes, indeed, and we have a lot going on front page newspapers on Kali, and I think for a lot of people, they'll be looking at what happens next now that the protest has been suspended. Authority newspaper says Labour on nationwide protest against hunger, hardship, insecurity. Government must address minimum wage, end hunger, unemployment, insecurity. NLC insists. Government has met most of their demands. Onye Georgia replies.
Yes, indeed. Also leading with the protest, the leadership says hardship, Labour protest grounds states, Labour protest ground states, NLC suspends protest, gives a federal government fresh 14-day ultimatum. Lawmakers recommend food stamps to ease ordeal as Falana seeks social security bill. And these are the writers to that story. Of course, the picture story is also making the front page of that protest. You have gunmen kill Nasarawa village head, 28 others.
This Nigeria looks at hardship too. NLC suspends nationwide protests. Objective has been achieved as workers in Sokoto, Osun, Edo, FCT, other states join rallies. Drama as police provide water, soft drinks, biscuits for Lagos protesters on page 4 and 20. You also want to look at that story on Tinubu launches expatriate employment levy, warns against wage gap between expat Nigerians on page 7.
That's an interesting angle to that story.
Absolutely.
Police became everybody's friend in Lagos.
It was fascinating.
All right, so look at the Daily Sun. CBN raises interest rate to 22.75%, pays out $400 billion. That's Forex request. You have details of that on page 2. And then the bold one, NLC defies threats, grounds Abuja states with protests. We're protesting hunger, non-implementation of minimum wage, that's Ajero speaking. Protests needless, the presidency replies.
Daily Trust is looking at the thrust of the cost of living crisis as the lead. NLC suspends protest, counter rally in Abuja. Police hold demonstration in Maiduguri. Lagos CP gives water, biscuit to protesters. But we also want to look at that. Mixed reactions trail Tinubu's approval of a Rasage report on page 22.
Enough is enough. As chairman of Ebonyi State Council of Nigeria Labour Congress calls on President Tinubu to resign, Akwa Ibom counterpart says if leaders do not want to change the situation, we will force them to. Benue State Governor Reverend Father Hyacinth Alia says governments are aware of suffering of Nigerian workers. And then you have other stories. Niger Delta women protest IOC's divestment without clean up.
Standard Times is looking still at hardship. NLC suspends nationwide protest. Presidency slams Labour. You also want to look at that above the masthead. You want to see the CBN raises interest rate to 22.75% as external reserves rise by $34 billion.
And then how 10 trillion intervention funds, that's 10 trillion naira now, intervention funds by previous administrations damaged Nigeria's economy. That's coming from the CBN Governor Kaduso. CBN raises benchmark interest rate to record 22.7%. Police, army, foil kidnap attempt in Katsina, rescue 10 victims.
The Guardian is interestingly going to be looking at that story differently. Here it talks about MPC decision, concerns for OPS as CBN moves against inflation, Naira speculators. You also look at that story there. Senate begins probe of Buhari government's 30 trillion Naira loan Ajoko to still. But what you still see there as picture story is that of the protesters yesterday.
The New Telegraph is also leading with hardship protests. It says, restore industrial hubs, palliatives to farmers, fix refineries. NLC tells federal government. Senate proposes 6-year single term for CBN governor. You can check out details on page 2, runs through page 3 as well.
Blueprint, NLC halts protest, issues fresh ultimatum, one subsidy for farmers, and that's how they roll this morning on their lead. You also want to look at the riders saying Delta workers demand palliatives from governor, and that's on page 6. Senate 6.1 trillion naira recapitalization for banks, and 6-year single term for CBN governor. The
Nigerian Tribune, end hunger, hardship, protesters tell Tinubu Police provide water biscuits to protesters in Lagos. Makinde addresses workers, calls for collective efforts to solve problem. And then CBN raises interest rate, is also making this paper to 22.75%, begins sale of forex to BDCs. Page 7.
And Daily Trust looks at cost of living crisis. NLC suspends protest. You also want to look at other stories, their picture story. But at both that, we see meningitis kills 20 students in Yobe. We've taken this paper before, and I'm sure that's another way to look at it.
All right, the Business Times is leading with MPC, while MPR was raised by 400 basis points. Kadusu explains, says Naira grossly undervalued. MPC outcome to hurt a real sector, Muda Yusuf says. Removal of petroleum subsidy challenging, but for long-term energy security. Tinubu speaks on page 2. That's the Business Times, really. And then there are several other papers, stories. There's shipping disruptions pose risk to global trade. Aba IPP comes on stream 20 years after conception. 20 years. Interesting for them there. All right, so let's now bring in our reviewer, and that is Honorable Chuks Akona, who joins us now. Honorable, welcome.
We're glad you could make it.
Good morning. Honorable independent profession, yes, so we need to acknowledge that. Okay, so we begin with your paper, the Authority newspaper, Labor on nationwide protest against hunger, hardship, insecurity, and then we have a picture story there. Other stories also captured by other papers, CBN hikes monetary policy rate to 22.7%. So why did your paper and other papers choose, to lead with this story and the fact that even the strike has been suspended a day after it started?
Yes, before we go there, we'll quickly talk about my colleague, Dr. Iyobosa, who is unavoidably absent this morning because of his death of his father. For many who do not know, Iyobosa lost his sister last week. He just returned from
we
just mourning his sister, and then his father passed on Monday. Our hearts go to the family of the
really trying times
of Edo State. I pray that God grant Father eternal rest. That's why Yobosa is not here this morning to bear with me. So that said, it's a very interesting time for the government and for Labour and for Nigerians. Even this morning I barely was able to make it because of the barricade by the military.
Were you there yesterday protesting?
No, I wasn't. I was protesting in my mind. Times are tough. Not only in Nigeria. All around the world. That's the truth. If truth must be told. But you see, it's I don't envy President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, because whoever emerged president in 2023 will also have faced a similar problem, because for 8 years Nigeria was 8 years was years of the low cost in Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari, who came with a smoking gun to tackle corruption. He slept on corruption, and it's not that we're going through all these problems. Because the truth is, they say whoever fails to plan, plans to fail. And that's the truth. So all these problems are not unexpected. Economists predicted this. For several years, people couldn't go to the farm. And aside crude oil, our GDP is hinged on agricultural production. We have large swaths of land in the north. Niger State, for instance, Niger State is bigger than the entire southeast. 5 southeast states with Akwa Ibom and Cross River State combined. So we know what terrorists did, in Niger State. We know what terrorists did in Borno State. These are farming. I have a farm in Nasarawa State, and if you go there, all the people who farm beans there now are those who are displaced by Boko Haram terrorists in Borno State. So they had to come here. And if we talk about housing in Abuja, the price of housing has become, there's so much pressure on accommodation in Abuja because of the influx of persons, occasioned by activities of terrorists. So I think, we have to also balance all this as when we do this, because, we were all in Nigeria when Buhari ran Nigeria aground. So, but, what people are saying is people are blaming Tinubu because Tinubu brought Buhari. But, there's no telling the heart of man. We've seen people who have bettered children who ended up killing them. You know, I'm not sure someone like Tinubu will have envisaged that Buhari would, you know, end up such a disaster. So the onus is on Tinubu. You know, he has, we've seen how Nigerians are railing at Buhari. So Tinubu has a golden opportunity to write his name in gold. That is, if he's a serious person. And, you know, from what we've been seeing so far, I think he's trying to, I think he's very conscious of the role of history. And he's trying to see if he can tackle some of this.
I just want posterity to judge him.
Exactly. We saw what happened a few days ago, the Orosanye report, you know, after 12 years, you know, it takes courage to be able to say, okay, we're scrapping this, we're doing this, we're doing
Real
that.
courage.
Exactly. And look at what the CBN did yesterday, you know, the MPR, you know, all efforts at salvaging the Naira. Because me, I'm not an economist, but I also know that in the mid-2000s, we saw what people did with shares in Nigeria, the capital market in Nigeria. They ruined. Imagine I bought Oceanic Bank shares for 39 naira.
Affected me as well.
For 39 naira and ended up selling for 1 naira 60 kobo.
Absolutely.
So I think those hawks who dealt with Nigerians in the mid-2000s on the share capital market are also the same persons who are working on our what they call it, on our currency. Because you don't tell me that, you know, it became like a joke. Every day, Naira was losing its value, and you couldn't justify that. And I told us here some days ago where a military facility in Abuja, where some people have gone to hide millions of dollars. That's the truth. So you don't, the buck stops at the table of Tinubu, but then we also have to also share in that blame.
Exactly. It takes me back to what your paper said, authority, and I think this Nigeria is also reiterating, saying that the objective of the protest has been met, and that's coming from the Minister of State for Labour, Kiriko Nyejocha. Beyond that, Labour has also said, well, another 14-day ultimatum if you do not,
meet our demands.
Meet our demands. So I'm wondering, which demands really, you know, in perspective, is she really talking about?
Thank you for watching. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing so you won't miss out any of our latest video.